By the sixth day, the poisoned water had humbled even the proudest of the riders. Men who had crossed half the world on horseback with laughter in their throats now clung to wet rails and spat bile into the sea, their braids hanging limp with spray, their eyes red with sleeplessness and disgust. The ships heaved and groaned around them. 24 merchant hulls and leaner hired galleys spread across a long gray swell beneath a sky the color of beaten steel. Salt lived in everything. It crusted the boards, the ropes, the hems of cloaks, the lashes of men who cursed it in half a dozen tongues. It turned leather tack stiff and stung the nostrils of the horses below decks until the beasts stamped and screamed and made the whole convoy smell like a drowned stable. Daenerys Targaryen stood at the bow of the lead cog with one hand wrapped around the rail and the other closed against the chill. The wind worried at the silver-white braid down her back and pressed the black wool of her riding dress against her legs. Above her, Drogon clung upside down to the timbered overhang like a glossy, malignant fruit, black wings half spread to taste the gale. Rhaegal prowled the wet line of the railing, claws ticking on wood. Viserion had found a perch atop a barrel and sat with his pale gold neck coiled, watching the sailors as if he were weighing each man for meat. They were larger than they had been when they clawed their way from the funeral pyre, though not by much. Each was still small enough to fit across both her forearms if anger did not make them stretch, small enough to vanish into the folds of shadow between crates and coiled lines, small enough that a crossbow quarrel could still kill them. Yet men looked at them and remembered stories older than their grandfathers, and stories had power enough to move kingdoms. Stories had brought the riders back to her. Stories had put ships beneath her feet. Not all the men who followed her had ridden with Khal Drogo to the Red Waste. Some had. Ago had never left. Kovaro had returned from the grass with 50 riders after hearing that dragons lived. Others had come in 2s and 10s and ragged, hungry bands, drawn to Qarth first by rumor and then by greed. They had wanted to see the miracle with their own eyes. Some had wanted to steal it. Some had wanted to kneel before it. Some had simply wanted a leader reckless enough to promise them the Greenlands at last. She had given them that promise. Another day, perhaps two, Jorah said beside her. He moved carefully on the slick deck, one broad hand resting near his sword belt, though there was little the blade could do against the sea or the weather. His beard was salted white at the ends, his mail hidden beneath a wool cloak darkened by spray. He looked more at home aboard ship than any man born to a saddle had a right to, but the lines around his mouth had deepened since dawn, and when the deck rose too sharply even, he spread his feet wider. "Will the wind hold?" she asked. "For the sailors, yes. For the horses, I could not say. For the riders..." He glanced toward the aft deck, where a knot of Dothraki crouched low and muttered to one another with the miserable intensity of men enduring something unmanly and therefore unforgivable. "They'll hold if they fear you more than they fear drowning." Daenerys did not smile. "I would rather they loved me." Jorah gave her the rough little look he reserved for hopes he deemed too gentle for the world. "On land, perhaps. On water, men obey the nearest knife and the strongest stomach." Below them, someone began to sing in Dothraki, low and fierce and rhythmically stubborn, as if a war chant might tame the waves by insult. Another voice answered, then failed in a retching cough that drew harsh laughter from a few of the sailors. The convoy had come together in pieces, all of them paid for by other men's fear. The spice traders of Qarth had wanted her and her dragons gone from their jeweled city. Saro had wanted her hand, and had settled, in the end, for her absence. A Pentoshi factor in Illyrio Mopatis' service had appeared with letters, coin, and captains willing to ask no pious questions so long as the silver rang true. By then, the tale of living dragons had run ahead of her like brushfire. The captains had expected a queen from old songs. What they had found was a girl not yet fully grown, a handful of handmaids, a knight in exile, 3 young beasts with furnace eyes, and fewer than 3,000 riders gaunt from dust and hunger. Yet they had taken her gold and dipped their flags and made way for her all the same. A sailor passed carrying a bucket of water, sloshing half of it onto his own boots. Viserion darted down, fast as a knife thrown in sunlight, seized a strip of dried fish from the man's belt in one snap, and launched himself to the mast where he devoured it with delighted ferocity. The sailor yelped, stumbled backward, then saw Daenerys watching and bowed so low he nearly went to his knees in the wet. "They're bolder every day," Jorah said. "They're hungry every day," she answered. "Us are your riders." That was true enough. Their stores had held, but no ship could carry the appetite of the Dothraki gladly, and the water casks had to be watched like gold. 2 horses had broken legs in the first storm, and a third had suffocated in its sling when the ship pitched wrong, and panic turned the hold into an uproar of hooves and teeth. The dead beasts had gone overboard to a great chorus of wailing from the men who had ridden them since colthood. Dothraki loved horses better than brothers. Some would sooner have thrown the sailors after. Aggo came up from the lower deck then, moving with the wary-legged care of a man forced to trust wood where grass should have been. His long braid was wrapped in oilcloth to keep it from the salt. His eyes, narrow and black, looked offended by the whole horizon. He touched fist to chest for her. "Khaleesi," he said in Dothraki. "The men ask when we will see land. They say the sea demon eats horses each night. They say the poison water is angry because no khal has ever whipped it." "Noi," Daenerys answered in the same tongue. "Tell them they will see land when I say they will. Tell them the sea has not killed me, nor you, nor their horses. Tell them if they wish to whip something, they may whip the first man who speaks of turning back." Aggo's mouth twitched. It was not quite amusement, but it was close enough to earn. "They will like that less than the sea. Then let them learn to like victory." When he had gone, she looked eastward, though nothing remained there now but haze and memory. Somewhere behind that veil lay the red waste, the bones of Drogo's great khalasar, the burnt chambers of a Qarthine house, the long road of her girlhood, and farther still the city with the red door where she had once been small enough to believe safety could be a place. Ahead lay Dorne, a country she had never seen, and had somehow dreamed all her life, through scents she could not have named until the first basket of lemons had been brought aboard for the captain's table, and their clean, sharp fragrance had struck her like grief. "Does Dorne remember us?" she asked quietly. Jorah heard the true question beneath it. Does Westeros remember? Does it want? Does it hate? Does it still know our name? "Some do," he said. "Some remember too much, some not enough. The Martells have reason to remember. Reason cuts both ways." "Elia," Daenerys said. He nodded. She had never known her brother Rhaegar's wife except through Viserys bitterness and fragments of whispered stories. Elia Martell. Dornish. Princess. Wife abandoned for another woman, then killed with her children when King's Landing fell. In Viserys' mouth, every dead person became an accusation. In her own thoughts, they were more dangerous than that. The dead could become mirrors. "The prince sent word," she said. "He offered harbor. He offered to receive you," Jorah corrected. "That is not the same as harbor, and neither is the same as help." Daenerys let the correction stand. Jorah distrusted courtesy unless he had seen the man's knife hand first. Perhaps he was right. In Qarth, courtesy had worn silks and jewels and smiled while calculating the worth of her dragon scales. Still, Dorne was the first hand extended from the land she meant to claim. A gust struck them broadside, hard enough to make the ship lurch. From below rose a cacophony of frightened horses. Drogon spread his wings and hissed into the wind as if defying it. Daenerys braced herself and stared forward until her eyes watered. "I was sold once for an army," she said. "Now I have an army. Small, miserable, half sick. It is more than my brother ever had." "Nah." Jorah's gaze stayed on the horizon. "Your brother had a name. You have that name and something he never had." She knew what he meant, though he did not say it. Fire, or perhaps the willingness to use it. Toward evening, the light died without beauty. The sky lowered. The sea turned black where it had been gray, and the wind shifted from a steady pressure to a restless series of slaps that sent the sailcloth thrumming. Sailors began moving faster, voices sharpened by old instinct. One of the captains shouted from the neighboring ship, and the answer came back thin on the gust. Below, the riders fell into silence one by one. Daenerys stood a long moment with salt on her lips, and her hand on the hilt of the small knife at her belt, though she could not have said what danger she meant to meet with it. Then the first cold drop struck her cheek, and behind it came the dark. The storm came in a rush so swift it felt less like weather than ambush. Rain struck first, hard and slanting, turning the deck into black glass under the lanterns. The sea rose after, not in graceful swells, but in violent humps that slammed the hull and made every beam complain. Men shouted in different tongues, and no one listened because the ship itself had begun to speak louder than any of them, groaning from stem to stern as if some giant hand had taken hold of it and meant to test how much wood could bear before it split. Below decks, the horses shrieked. Not whinnies now, not restive snorts, but raw, desperate screams that lifted the hair at the back of Daenerys' neck. She had been half asleep on a pallet, lashed into her narrow cabin when the first roll threw her against the wall hard enough to take her breath. By the time she burst onto the deck, Drogon was on her shoulder like a hot black hook, claws biting through wool and skin alike, while Rhaegal and Viserion spiraled overhead in frantic circles, no larger than hounds, but no less furious for that. Lightning cracked over the convoy, whitening the world. For one instant, she saw every ship around them in stark silver, sails reefed, masts bent, men like insects clinging to rigging. The water between hulls frothed into ravening peaks. Then the dark fell again and the world shrank to rain, shouts, and the sway beneath her feet. One of the Dothraki had gotten a knife to the mooring lines on the aft deck. Whether he meant to free a horse, lash himself to something solid, or cut apart the ship itself in blind terror, Daenerys never learned. She only saw Jorah slam into him shoulder first, driving him against the rail while the blade skidded away in a bright arc across wet planks. Another rider lunged in, then another. Ago caught one by the wrist. Kovaro punched the second in the throat. The sailors gave them all a berth that was equal parts prudence and pure fear. "Bind him!" Jorah roared, hauling the first man upright by his hair. The rider spat seawater and curses and tried to wrench free. "The water is cursed," he shouted in Dothraki. "The horses die. The gods drown us for following a woman." "Nuye, Abadai." A silence opened around the words, though the storm still raged. It lasted no more than a heartbeat, but in that heartbeat, Daenerys felt every eye turn. Not all of them Dothraki. Some belonged to sailors who could not follow the language but knew a challenge when they heard one. Some belonged to her own small household. Some belonged to Jorah, who had gone very still. She went to the man herself. The deck tried to throw her sideways. She caught a line, wrenched free, and crossed the last steps with the same stubborn fury with which she had crossed deserts in mourning and hunger. Rain plastered silver hair to her face. Drogon spread his wings and hissed from her shoulder, hot breath against her ear. The rider had a face she knew, though not his name. One of the men who had come to her outside Qarth with 30 others, and a promise that he had ridden behind Drogo once. Young still, though the storm had stripped him to something more child than man. His eyes were white-ringed and mad with fear. Daenerys looked at him and then at the ring of wet faces beyond. "Hear me," she said in Dothraki, and when the storm swallowed the first word, she shouted the second. "Hear me." The men listened. She had no helmet, no crown, no armor. Only a soaked black dress, bare hands, and 3 dragons no bigger than dogs. It would have been a poor enough costume for majesty, yet she felt the moment settle around her like something waiting to be claimed. "The poison water has not taken me," she said. "It has not taken Ago or Kovaro or your horses, though it has tried. You crossed because I commanded it. You crossed because the green lands lie before us and not behind. You crossed because the old stories were written for cowards and dead men. The ship pitched hard. Somewhere a spar cracked. No one looked away from her. If any man cuts a line again, she went on. "I will have his hands taken before dawn. If any man speaks of turning back, I will put him over the side and let him ask the sea for mercy himself. Look at me. I walked into fire and came out with dragons. Do you think rain will frighten me? Do you think water will? Maybe." She stepped closer to the bound rider until there was no room between them for his fear not to touch her. "Do you?" He could not answer. Drogon bent his narrow head and blew a ribbon of smoke across the man's cheek. The rider flinched so violently his knees buckled. Daenerys turned to Aggo. "Tie him to the mainmast until morning." Aggo's teeth flashed in the rain. "It will be done." She spun then, seized the fallen knife from the deck, and drove it point first into the rail so hard the hilt quivered. "No man on these ships leaves without my leave," she said. "No horse, no saddle, no soul." The riders shouted back to her, some in approval, some because fear had to come out somehow and shouting was better than weeping. Jorah looked at her a long moment, something unreadable moving through his weathered face. Then he nodded once and turned away to help the sailors with the lines. The storm worsened before it passed. Twice she went below among the horses with Irri and Jikwi, and 3 sailors carrying shuttered lamps. The hold was hellishly close, full of urine and panic and the brutal hammering of hooves against wood. The beasts rolled their eyes and snapped at one another in their slings. One had broken free and thrown itself against a post until blood striped its chestnut shoulder. Daenerys took its face between her hands while Jikwi crooned to it in a horse song from the grass. Drogon and Rhaegal stalked the beams above, hissing at the smell. Viserion vanished and reappeared with a rat in his mouth, the grisly prize clamped between his needle teeth. When at last she climbed back to the deck, soaked through, trembling from exhaustion and cold, the rain had softened. The sea still rose like a breathing thing, but the worst of its malice seemed spent. Men moved now with the spent care of survivors. A captain crossed himself before passing her. One of the Dothraki touched fist to brow. The bound rider hung against the mast with his head down, salt water streaming off his braid. Jorah came to her at the prow, carrying a heavy wool cloak. He laid it around her shoulders without asking. "You've a gift for choosing grand moments," he said. "I had to do something. You did." His gaze moved toward the men behind them. "They'll remember it. Will that make them obey?" For a while, his mouth twitched. Long enough, perhaps. She drew the cloak tight. It smelled of wet sheep, leather, and him. Beyond the black water she could see nothing, but the wind had changed. There was warmth in it now, or the ghost of warmth. A softness under the salt she had not felt before. Jorah noticed her lift her head. "What is it?" She breathed in again. Dust, somewhere very far off. Hot stone, and threaded through both so faintly she could almost have imagined it, the clean, bright scent of citrus. "Land," she said. This time when the ship rose, it felt as though the world were lifting them toward it. They made land at dawn beneath a sky washed clear and pale as polished bone. The coast of Dorne rose out of the morning not in the lush green profusion of the song's visories had once hissed at her, but in layers of red and ochre stone cut by narrow streams and low wind-bent trees. The sea there was bluer than it had any right to be after the days they had endured. Along the curve of the shore lay fishing boats pulled above the tide line, their hulls painted in faded colors, and behind them a strip of sand broken by driftwood, stakes, and a waiting line of horsemen and spearmen under banners of sun and spear. No one cheered when the first ship dropped anchor. The sailors lowered gangplanks with hands that still shook from the night. Horses had to be coaxed and shoved, blindfolded and cursed into making the descent. One gray mare went half mad and nearly leapt between ship and shore before a pair of Dothraki threw their weight against her. Another simply stood quivering, foam flecking her mouth, until Daenerys herself took her bridle and murmured to her until she came. When her own mare finally put hoof to sand, Daenerys followed. The ground felt strange under her boots after so many days afloat, too still to be trusted. For a moment she stood with the lead rope in her hand and let the morning heat touch her face. Lemons. There it was. Faint still, but real now, carried from somewhere inland. The scent hit her so sharply that memory came with it. A courtyard, sun on a wall, a red door, the shape of safety so old it had become almost holy. She shut the thought away before it could undo her. Home had always had more doors in memory than in truth. Ahead, the Dornish waited with admirable discipline. At their center stood the biggest man Daenerys had ever seen who was not Dothraki. He was not fat. There was too much iron in the way he carried his weight for that. His shoulders were massive beneath a plain yellow-brown tunic and leather brigandine, and in his hand he held a long axe with a lacquered shaft nearly as tall as he was. His bald scalp gleamed in the light. His beard was cut square and dark with threads of gray. He watched her disembark with the grave stillness of a carved god studying a supplicant to see if she would prove unworthy. When she had reached dry sand, he stepped forward and struck the butt of the axe into the earth. "I am Hota," he said in a heavy accented common tongue. "Captain of guards to Prince Doran Martell of Dorne. By his order I offer you bread and salt, water and shade, and safe conduct to Sunspear." "Ma." A boy came behind him with a tray. Upon it rested a coarse round loaf, a bowl of salt, and a ewer beaded with coolness. It was a clever offer. Not quite guessed right for her whole host. Not yet. A testing of forms. Daenerys let the silence stretch only long enough to show she understood. Then she broke bread, dipped it in salt, and ate. The water tasted of clay jars and cool stone. It was the sweetest thing she had drunk in days. "My thanks to your prince," she said. "Tell him I accept his courtesy." Ario's dark eyes dropped for one measured glance to the dragons. Drogon had climbed from her shoulder to the pommel of her saddle and sat there with his wings tucked, watching the Dornish in return. Rhaegal clung to the rail of the gangplank behind her. Viserion had found a heap of nets and was crawling through it like pale fire made flesh. "The prince was told they were small," Ario said. "They are?" Daenerys answered. "Until they are not." There was no change in his face. Yet, one of the spearmen behind him swallowed visibly. Jorah dismounted beside her and gave the captain a soldier's curt nod. "Will the prince receive her alone, or with her people?" "With as many as courtesy allows and walls permit," Ario said. "Not with a khalasar." At that, the riders behind Daenerys stirred restlessly. Sand hissed under hooves. A murmur in Dothraki rippled outward like heat. Daenerys laid a calming hand on her mare's neck before the horse could answer their tension with its own. "My people will camp where there is water," she said. "They will not be penned like market goats." Ario inclined his head. "There is water by the green blood and room enough for horses. The prince has ordered fodder brought. He has also ordered that no market town be troubled." It was phrased as information, but the warning sat clear beneath it. Dorne would feed them, for now. Dorne expected discipline in return. "Then no market town will be troubled," Daenerys said. Jorah glanced at her, knowing as well as she did how much work those words would cost. A little girl no older than 7 had edged from behind the spear line while the adults spoke. She wore an orange scarf too large for her and held a basket of dates against her hip. By the time anyone noticed, she had come almost close enough to touch Viserion in the nets. The dragon lifted his head, fruit fly quick, and bared tiny white teeth. The child froze. A Dornish woman started forward, horror on her face. But Daenerys was closer. She crouched in the sand. "Stay still," she told the girl gently. The child obeyed with the solemn courage only children and the truly stupid ever display before danger. Daenerys extended her hand to Viserion. The pale dragon hissed once, then leapt lightly from the nets to her forearm, claws pricking, wings unfurling in a flash of cream and gold. He snuffed at the dates, disappointed by the lack of blood, then sneezed a wisp of smoke that made the girl's eyes widen to moons. "What is your name?" Daenerys asked her. "Lysa," the girl whispered. "Lysa, then." Daenerys selected one date from the basket, split it, and held the sticky flesh beneath Viserion's snout. He licked it with distaste and turned away. The little girl laughed, a tiny involuntary peal, and all at once the tension along the spear line loosened by a thread. Hota watched the exchange without expression. Yet when the child's mother gathered her back, he did not rebuke either of them. The unloading took most of the morning. By the time the last horse had reached shore, and the cargo was being sorted beneath the sun, the riders had recovered enough of themselves to begin looking like Dothraki again rather than shipwrecked spirits. They stood straighter on land. Their voices returned. Some knelt to press both palms to the earth, muttering to whatever gods ruled grass and hooves and men who hated boats. The sailors crossed themselves and thanked every god they knew to be rid of them. Daenerys mounted at last and looked inland. The land rose in ripples of baked color and scrub. Somewhere beyond those low ridges lay Sunspear, and beyond Sunspear the passes into the kingdoms her father had once ruled. She felt, for the first time since the pyre, the true shape of what she had chosen. Not wandering now, not begging, not surviving from one hostile city to the next. Claiming. Areo signaled, and the Dornish line parted to make a road. As she nudged her mare forward, Jorah rode close enough for only her to hear him. A warm welcome by Dornish standards. Do you know their standards? I know men who smile while counting how many of your teeth they may have to knock out later. She did smile then, if only a little. Then let them count. Behind her, the khalasar began to move. Bells chiming, leather creaking, hooves thudding onto the hard Dornish sand. Ahead, under the rising sun, the captain of Doran Martell led her toward the first gate Westeros had opened to her. On land, the riders remembered themselves. By midday, their misery had burned off under the sun, and the old proud rhythm had returned to them. They sat their horses as though they had grown out of the saddles. Their backs straightened. Their braids swung with the motion of the column. Men who had gone green and cowed at sea now sang again in hard-clipped phrases, rough songs of grass and blood and stallions that had never known fences. If the sea had shamed them, the land was swift in forgiveness. Dorne rose around them in austere beauty. The road wound through stretches of red earth and pale stone where thorn bushes clung low and stubborn, then dipped by groves of lemon and olive, then climbed again between dry ridges from which watchtowers stared down with old-patient suspicion. Here and there they passed villages crouched around wells, their flat roofs glaring white in the sun, their doors painted green or blue against the heat. Brown-faced children peered from shade. Women with bright scarves and level eyes stood with pitchers balanced on their hips and looked straight at the riders instead of ducking their heads. Dornish men leaned on spears, pruning hooks, knives. No one appeared eager to embrace an arriving khalasar. No one ran either. The smell of the country changed by the mile. Dust, citrus, hot stone, horse sweat, the faint clean bitterness of crushed herbs under hooves. It smelled less like the stories of Westeros viceroys had hoarded, and more like something fiercer, more honest. A land that did not need prettiness because it had survived too long without it. Daenerys rode near the front with Jorah, Areo, and a dozen of the prince's horsemen in loose attendance. Irri and Jhiqui followed with her pack animals and the extra water skins. Ago ranged ahead and back, his eyes always moving. The dragons came and went as they pleased. Drogon favored Daenerys' saddle when the sun was high and the leather warm. Rhaegal preferred the lance rest of a Dornish outrider who tolerated the green beast with stoic resignation. Viserion harried insects, birds, and once a lizard that made the mistake of basking on a wall. Every mile brought more strength to her riders, and more danger with it. The trouble began in a village of mud brick walls, and a single public well where the prince's men had arranged a noon stop. The villagers had hauled out baskets of coarse bread, onions, olives, and skins of sour red wine for sale under Doran's writ. Most of the Dothraki cared nothing for bread and less for onions, but the wine vanished fast enough. Daenerys had only just dismounted to stretch her legs when a sharp cry cut through the heat. One of her riders, broad-shouldered, wearing bells enough in his braid to mark many victories, had seized a wineseller's daughter by the arm and pulled her from behind her father's table because she had yanked a skin back when he would not pay. The girl could not have seen 15 name days. She fought with both hands and one bare foot, clawing his face while her father shouted, and 3 Dornish men reached for knives. The whole village froze on the edge of blood. Daenerys moved before she was aware of deciding. She was in the saddle again with one foot jammed home, her mare lunging forward so abruptly that Jorah cursed behind her. The rider turned at the thunder of hooves, surprise flashing across his face just before the braided leather of her riding whip cracked across his knuckles. He released the girl with an oath. "Down," Daenerys said in Dothraki. He stared at her. He was older than she, harder by far, a man who had ridden behind Khal since before she had learned the weight of her own name. In another life, he might have laughed and kept the girl. "Down," she said again. The village held its breath. The girl stumbled backward into her father's arms. Knives remained out. Jorah had come up on one side of her now, Areo on the other, his long axe upright and terrible in the sun. The rider spat into the dust. "A sheep people sell drink," he said. "A rider takes what he wants." Daenerys kept her voice level. "Not here, not beneath my peace." A murmur moved through the Dothraki nearest enough to hear. "My peace." It was not a phrase Khaleesi used lightly. He laughed once, harshly. "Your peace? This is no grass sea. No Khal speaks." Aggo came out of nowhere and knocked the man from the saddle with a single savage blow to the side of the knee. The rider hit the dust hard enough to grunt. Before he could scramble up, Aggo had an arak at his throat. Daenerys did not look away. "Kneel, Dutta." For a heartbeat, she thought he would choose death. Pride warred with sense in his face. Around them, the villagers watched with hatred and hope in equal measure. The Dothraki watched with contempt, curiosity, and the first stirrings of something more dangerous: calculation. Slowly, cursing under his breath, the rider sank to one knee. "Your braid," Daenerys said. This time, the murmur that ran through the riders was louder. A Dothraki's braid was no mere hair. It was victory, made visible. It was proof. To cut it was shame. The man's eyes widened. "Khaleesi, you drew shame upon me before strangers. You would turn friends into enemies before we have crossed one pass." Aggo did not hesitate. One hard yank, one slash, and the bells came away into the dust with a spill of black hair. The rider made a sound then. Not loud, not dignified, but raw as a wound newly opened. Daenerys took the severed braid from Aggo's hand and tossed it at the feet of the girl's father. "You are paid," she said in common tongue. "More than the wine was worth." The old man stared at the offering, stunned beyond courtesy. The daughter, cheek flushed where fingers had bruised her, stared at Daenerys with a mixture of fear and astonishment that said the moment would be told and retold for years. "No man takes what is mine without leave," Daenerys said, turning so both Dornish and Dothraki could hear. "Not a skin of wine, not a daughter, not a loaf, not a well. Any man who forgets that will lose more than his hair." Silence followed. Then Areo gave one slow nod that was almost invisible, but not to her. The column moved on soon after, quieter now. Jorah rode beside her for a long while before he spoke. "You've bought yourself hatred. From him? From more than him. Dothraki do not love being shamed. Nor do Dornish fathers love having daughters stolen. That may prove the more useful kind of resentment." Daenerys looked back once. The shorn rider rode with his head low and no bells in his hand. A gap had opened around him among the others. Whether in mockery or respect for the danger of his temper, she could not tell. "Drogo would have laughed at me," she said. Jorah was silent a moment. "Drogo was Khal of the Grass. You mean to be Queen of Kingdoms." The words settled in her more heavily than praise should have done. By late afternoon, the sea had reappeared to their right, a hard blue gleam beyond low stone and salt grass. The towers of Sunspear showed at last in the distance, spears of pale gold and warm sandstone rising above the coast, like something built not merely to be defended, but to be seen. Sun flashed on high windows. Banners stirred. The sight of walls, real walls, in the land she had only ever known through stories, struck Daenerys with a force almost physical. This, then, was the edge of it. The first threshold. She rode towards Sunspear with dust on her boots, salt still in her cloak, and the smell of lemons growing stronger on the wind. Sunspear did not greet her like a fortress. It greeted her like a memory of power. The outer walls were old and sun-drunk, their stone warm as skin under the late daylight. Beyond them rose the older dark mass of the sandship, the slender grace of the spear tower, courtyards full of palms and potted citrus, latticed galleries where veiled women and hard-eyed men watched her pass, and fountains whose water seemed almost a taunt after the road. Everything smelled of heat, polished stone, oranges, oil, and that faint medicinal scent that clings to old places where old pain is born with discipline. Her khalasar was not permitted within the walls. Doran Martell had made that plain through Areo before the gates even opened. Water had been sent for the horses. Paddocks and shade cloths were laid beyond the city, under watch. 100 of her chosen might accompany her no farther than the outer ward. 5 could enter the prince's private hall. Of those 5, one had to be Jorah, or she would not have stepped through the doors. Even so, as she crossed the cool patterned tiles of the audience chamber with the hush of the fountain in her ears and the eyes of strangers on her face, she understood how vulnerable walls made a person. Out on open ground, danger came from every side and honesty lived in it. Within walls, danger chose its manners. Prince Doran Martell waited at the far end of the hall beneath a carved screen that threw patterned shade across the marble. He did not rise. Pain had claimed too much of his body for such ceremonies. He sat in a wheeled chair of dark wood, cushioned and set with silver, his feet wrapped and raised on a low stool. His robes were plain by princely standards, soft orange silk over cream linen, a simple chain at the throat, no ostentatious jewels beyond a ring that caught the light when he shifted his hand. He was older than she had imagined, his face full but lined at the eyes and mouth, his hair touched with gray. Illness had softened the flesh of him. It had not softened the gaze. That gaze went first to her face, then to Drogon on her shoulder, then to the other 2 dragons prowling the floor behind her with comical seriousness, claws skittering lightly on polished stone. Only after that did it settle on Jorah and the others. "Daenerys," he said. His voice was low, warm, and careful, as if he weighed each word before granting it passage. "Welcome to Dorne." "No, Your Grace." "No, Princess." No title at all. She stopped 3 paces short of the dais. "Prince Doran." Between them, the fountain kept whispering. Doran made the smallest motion with his fingers. A servant came forward bearing bread and salt once more, together with a small bowl of olives and a cup of watered wine. The prince himself took a piece of bread, dipped it, and ate before offering the tray to her. It was guest right now, properly done, not a half measure on a windswept shore. Daenerys accepted and tasted the salt. The wine was cool, tart, and thin. "You honor me. I honor my house," Doran said, "and those dead of it who have cause to take an interest in your coming." Ilya. He did not need to say her name for it to stand between them. She saw suddenly, not the prince in silk and pain, but the brother of a murdered woman measuring the child of another ruined house. Whatever else Doran Martell might be, he was not a man untouched by history. He looked at Jorah then. "Ser Jorah Mormont, I knew your father by reputation. A hard man, an honorable one by all accounts." Jorah inclined his head with grave reserve. "My prince, Bear Island must seem distant from these shores. It seems farther every year." A flicker of something almost sympathetic crossed Doran's face and vanished. Exile is a long road. Daenerys understood then that this prince collected truths the way other men collected debts. He dismissed all lesser courtesies with a small wave. "You have crossed the sea with horse lords who fear it more than death. You have landed in my country with 3 dragons, and if my scouts speak true, under 3,000 riders. You ask much if you ask Dorne to place its fate in your hands." His eyes rested on her steadily. "Tell me why I should." The hall had gone very still. Even the servants seemed to breathe more softly. "Because you made a promise once to my brother," she nearly said, though she did not yet know enough to know if it was true. "Because Robert Baratheon is dead and the lions who murdered your kin still prosper. Because the realm is split and weak, and I am the blood of old kings." All true, none sufficient. So she answered with the truth that mattered most to her. "Because I have come home," she said. "Because the men who took my father's throne are dead or dying, and the men who feast on what they stole are at war with each other. Because if Dorne waits for a safer hour, it will wait forever. And because those dragons are small today, yes, they will not remain so." "Nah." Doran's fingers tapped the arm of his chair once. "A promise of future fire. And riders in the present." "Riders," he said softly, "whose customs include rape, theft, and slavery? I do not say this to insult you. I say it because my people know what they are." The rebuke was gentle enough in tone. It landed like a thrown stone. Daenerys thought of the wineseller's daughter and the braid in the dust. "I know what they are," she said. "I also know what lords are. When victory tells them they may be wolves without shame. Do not speak to me as though savagery wears only horsehair." Something like approval touched the corner of Doran's mouth. Not amusement. Something colder and more useful. "No," he said. "In that, you are not wrong." He asked her then of the voyage, of Qarth, of the size of the force that still obeyed her, of the captains who had brought her west, of which ports had seen her sails. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was to ask about provisions, discipline, sickness, horse losses, routes, names of captains, names of riders, numbers. A cautious man's questions. A ruler's questions. Not once did he ask about prophecy or destiny or what her dragons might mean to singers. When she told him of the trouble in the village and the braid she'd cut, he sat back a fraction deeper in his chair. "And your riders bore it?" he asked. "They bore what they had no strength to refuse." For now, she agreed. His eyes flicked to Ario. "Captain." Ario stepped forward one pace. "No harm has come to the towns under your writ, my prince. Yet." The big man's face did not alter. "Yet." Doran folded his hands. "You see my difficulty, Daenerys. I do not doubt your blood. I do not doubt your courage, though courage and youth are cousins and often mistaken for each other. What I doubt is whether you have crossed the sea to take a kingdom or to set it on fire." The question shamed her, because part of her knew she had come with both desires twined together. "I did not endure all that I have endured to sit on ashes," she said at last. Doran held her gaze a long moment. Then, in a tone so level it took her a heartbeat to understand the generosity hidden in it, he said, "Good." He did not offer an alliance then. He offered chambers, baths, physicians if needed, and a private supper after sunset if she would honor him. Her people would be fed beyond the walls. Her horses watered. No banners would yet be raised for her. No raven sent in her name until he had heard more. It was less than she had hoped and more than she had feared. When the audience ended, she turned to go and felt Doran's voice follow her. "One thing more." She looked back. "When my sister died," he said, "many men swore loudly that they would remember. Time proved how thin a thing memory can be when comfort is asked to pay for it." He rested one hand on the arm of his chair. "Dorne remembers. That is not the same as saying Dorne is foolish." The words might have been warning, apology, or promise. Perhaps all three. Daenerys bowed the smallest degree a queen might give a prince without losing any part of herself. "Then let us see which of us can afford wisdom." Outside, in the galleries of Sunspear, the evening light had gone honey gold. The sea beyond the walls was burning blue. Somewhere in the courtyards, the dragons were already hunting moths through the orange trees. The water gardens were lovelier than any place Daenerys had expected to find in a land of stone and sun. Doran had sent for her at dusk instead of night, when the day's furnace was easing and the pools held the last blue of the sky. Lamps were being lit under arcades. The orange trees gave off a sweetness that drifted over the water with the cooler air from the sea. Children ran barefoot over mosaic paths, shrieking with delight as they splashed one another in shallow channels and marble basins. Some were pale-haired and fine-featured in silks. Some were brown and broad-footed in simple linen. Some wore tiny gold chains. Some wore none. None seemed to care. They played together without hierarchy, united by the importance children grant to water, speed, and laughter. Doran sat in his wheeled chair beneath an awning, while a servant wrapped a light blanket over his knees against the evening cool. Ario stood nearby with his axe and his habitual air of being born from the stone itself. No other guards were close enough to hear. When Daenerys approached, Doran gestured toward the pools. "You were raised across the sea," he said. "You may not know this place. Princes and serving girls' sons play together here. Daughters of lords and daughters of fishermen. It was my mother's wish. Then mine." Daenerys looked at the children. A little boy splashed a girl in a gold anklet and received a shriek that sounded exactly like triumph. "Why tell me this? Because conquest is a splendid word spoken by men who do not carry the buckets after battle." Doran's tone remained mild. "And because if you would speak of taking a kingdom, you should know what a kingdom is for." The words pricked. She folded her hands before her and said nothing. Doran let the silence breathe. He was very good at silence. It was not emptiness in him, but a weapon sheathed. "My brother Oberyn would say you should ride at once," he said after a time. "He always preferred action to patience and danger to delay. He is not always wrong, but he is not here, and I am. So I ask another kind of question. What happens if your riders take Dorne for their first pasture instead of merely their road? What happens to those children?" Daenerys had no easy answer and would not insult him with one. "I cut a man's braid today, so I heard. If he had done worse, I would have killed him. Would you?" The prince's gaze never sharpened, yet the question did. "Or would you have told yourself you needed his sword for the war ahead?" There it was. Not a question of force, not a question of dragons, but the oldest question power asks of itself and lies about when it answers. She thought of the villages on the road, the girl dragged by the arm, the years she had spent being moved about like an ornament or a threat, the way Viserys had spoken of taking back what was his, as if kingdoms were jewelry misplaced by careless servants. She thought of Drogo promising a son the world through fire. She thought of the little children in the water, untroubled yet by the names of kings. "All the men who were meant to win my throne for me are dead," she said. "My father, my brother Rhaegar, Viserys, Drogo, my son, every one of them is dust or ash. If I am ever to sit a throne, I will take it with my own hands." She drew breath. "But I will not take it so that children like these can learn my name by watching their fathers hang." Doran studied her for so long that she felt again, absurdly, like a girl brought before a master for judgment. Then he inclined his head. "That," he said, "is better than rage. Not safer, better." He dismissed the servants with a gesture. Even Ario withdrew to the far archway, not out of earshot perhaps, but beyond the circle of intimate speech. "There was a time," Doran said quietly, "when one of my children was promised to your brother Viserys, in secret. A pact made in the years when Robert still wore his crown, and men pretended he would wear it forever." "Nay." The words struck her like unexpected cold water. "Viserys never told me. I imagine there are many things Viserys never told you." She could not dispute it. Her brother had guarded grievance the way misers guard coin. If a secret had not fed his vanity, or sharpened his anger, he might have forgotten it existed. "You meant to support him." "I meant," Doran said, "to avenge my sister without killing my people in the attempt. Those are not always desires that can be served by the same road." He watched the children again. "When your brother died, the pact died with him. The purpose did not. Daenerys looked out over the pools. One of the girls had seen Drogon perched above the awning and was staring in delight until her nurse pulled her gently away. The dragon watched the water with disdain. He disliked getting wet. "Then why wait?" she asked. "Why all these years?" "Because Robert Baratheon sat secure. Jon Arryn ruled wisely enough to steady the realm. Lord Tywin Lannister was rich enough to buy men and cruel enough to spend them. Because vengeance pursued too early is merely suicide with better songs made afterward." Doran's fingers tightened once over the carved arm of his chair. "Because I have watched princes ruin the lives of other men's children for the sake of proving they are not afraid." His meaning was clear enough that she felt a flash of shame, though whether it belonged to her or to the father she had never known she could not say. "Now," Doran continued, "Robert is dead. The boy on the Iron Throne is contested. Stannis has his ships and his grievances. Renly has the Reach at his back and enough vanity to think flowers grow from his footsteps. Robb Stark bleeds the lions in the Riverlands. Balon Greyjoy has crowned himself in the islands and calls himself king over Salt and Reaving. The realm is divided as it has not been in a generation." He turned back to her. "That is why I did not close my gates to you, and why you do not yet open them fully." A small smile. "You learn quickly." Daenerys moved to the edge of the pool and looked at her own wavering reflection between tiles of blue and gold. She was not dressed as a beggar now, nor as a bride traded in fear. She looked almost what the world called her. Almost. "What would opening them fully look like?" she asked. "Open banners?" Doran's tone made the phrase sound almost vulgar. "A proclamation for every ravenry from Sunspear to the Wall? My spears riding beneath your dragon? Not yet. That would make the choice easy for your enemies. I prefer to burden them with uncertainty first." He outlined it then, careful as a man placing stones across water. "Shelter now. Provisions. Fresh horse fodder. Quiet messages to certain houses whose loyalties were old, tangled, or profit-driven. Guides through the lands east and north. No open declaration until she showed she could command her riders, move swiftly, and choose targets that made political sense rather than merely satisfying hunger. If she wanted Dorne, she would have to prove she was worth the risk of being seen. "And if I fail?" she asked. Then Dorne received the displaced princess with courtesy, and nothing more. It was ruthless. It was fair. She hated that she respected it. The sky deepened. Somewhere a flute began to play a slow, mournful tune from another courtyard. The children were being called in by names and pet names and threats of early bed. Their reluctant protests floated over the water. "Very well," Daenerys said. "What is the first proof you require?" Doran looked not at her but at Drogon, who had crept down the awning post and now crouched 2 arm lengths away, head cocked as if he too wanted the answer. "Keep Dorne from fearing you more than it hates the lions," the prince said. "Do that, and you may find my country capable of much." When she rose to leave, Doran added, almost gently, "Patience is not surrender, Daenerys." The impatient often confuse the two because patience asks them to live with their own fire a little longer. Outside the gardens, the first stars were burning above the dark sea. She walked back to her chambers with the smell of lemon leaves and pool water lingering in her hair, and for the first time since the ships had made shore, she felt the shape of rule changing inside her from desire into labor. The test came sooner than either she or Doran would have liked. For 2 days, the camp beyond Sunspear held uneasily. Water was brought. Grain for the horses arrived under guard. Goats and fowl came in from surrounding villages to be bought, not taken. Dornish traders tested their courage against the lure of silver. Dothraki riders pushed the limits of every rule she had spoken and every patience she possessed. Some took to the discipline well enough when promised that rich lands lay just beyond the mountains. Others grew savage with waiting. A khalasar left idle begins to eat itself. On the 3rd evening, just after sunset had bled out of the sky and the cook fires were beginning to glow across the camp like low red stars, a commotion rose near the southern edge where the herds and supply carts were kept. Daenerys reached it to find a circle already formed. Riders on horseback, or crouched on their heels. Dornish drovers and camp servants, standing back with murder in their faces. Aggo holding one arm out to keep them from rushing each other. On the ground lay a dead goatherd in a darkening pool, his skull split nearly to the ear. Beside him knelt his daughter, a grown woman this time, not a child, clutching a blood-soaked cloak to the wound as if the dead might yet be stitched whole by insistence. Her mouth was open, but she had no voice left. She had spent it on the first screaming. The accused was one of the riders from Kovaro's band. He stood with a wine jar still in one hand and blood on the curve of his auric. Drunk, or close enough that the distinction scarcely mattered. The goat herder, they told her, had demanded payment for 2 slaughtered animals. The rider had answered with the blade. Then he had reached for the daughter too, not understanding or not caring that this camp was under Daenerys' direct order and Doran's wary toleration. No one spoke when she came into the ring. The crackle of the fire seemed suddenly loud. Jorah dismounted beside her. "If you spare him," he said low, "Dorne will know what your peace is worth. And if I kill him, the riders will know too." Daenerys looked from the corpse to the daughter to the man with blood drying on his blade. The old temptation whispered to her then, the practical one, the ugly one. "You need him. You need all of them. What is one dead goat herd against a throne?" Kings made such bargains every day and then called it necessity. Doran's question in the water gardens came back to her as if spoken into her ear. Or would you have told yourself you needed his sword? The rider saw indecision and mistook it for weakness. He spread his arms, laughing thickly. A sheep man. His common tongue was poor, but the meaning needed no translation. One man. One goat man. Aggo turned his head and spat in disgust. Daenerys dismounted. The camp ring opened before her, lantern light touching faces one by one. Hard, curious, resentful, expectant. She stopped before the killer. "You murdered a man beneath my peace," she said in Dothraki. "He insulted me. He asked payment. He was sheep." The daughter made a sound then, not words, only a broken animal sound that finished what language could not. Daenerys felt something cold and precise settle into place inside her. Neil died. The rider blinked. No. Aggo stepped in at once. One slash of his leg behind the man's knee and a shove to the shoulder put him in the dust. Kovaro took the wine jar from his hand and smashed it against a wheel. The smell of sour red spread through the dark. The man fought up again, swearing. Jorah moved as though to help, then checked himself and stood still. This was not a task another man could do for her. Daenerys drew the small curved auric she had taken to wearing because the riders respected its shape more than any Westerosi sword. Its edge was polished bright by constant oiling. She had trained with it, clumsily at first, then less so. It was still no weapon for a grand duel. It did not need to be. She rested the blade against the kneeling man's throat, not enough to cut. Enough to tell him his next breath was a favor. "You came over the poison water because I promised you war," she said, her voice carrying farther than she expected in the hush. "I promised you roads, horses, gold, and enemies worthy of your blades. I did not promise you Dorne. I did not promise you my friends. I did not promise you women dragged screaming to the dust." The rider glared up at her, drunk courage and humiliation burning in his eyes. "You are woman," he said. A murmur, dangerous and fascinated, moved through the circle. Daenerys pressed the edge a hair deeper. A bead of blood welled scarlet at his throat. "Yes," she said, "and I am the woman you followed onto the sea." No one breathed. She straightened and handed the auric to Aggo. "Take his head." The silence broke not in shouting but in the strange inward hiss of many men realizing a line has been crossed and cannot be uncrossed. The rider found his voice at last. He begged then, not nobly, not in words fit to repeat. He pleaded to old victories, to Drogo's memory, to the right of riders over lesser men, to the needs of war, to anything that might make someone else decide for her. No one did. Ago looked only to Daenerys. When she nodded, he drew in one clean motion and ended it. The head rolled once in the dust and stopped. The daughter of the dead Gotthard closed her eyes, but did not look away. Daenerys waited until the shock had reached every face in the ring. Then she spoke again. "Hear me," she said in Dothraki. "You crossed the sea for me. You will not shame me. You will not weaken me. Any man who steals beneath my peace steals from me. Any man who rapes beneath my peace rapes against my word. Any man who murders those who feed us murders one of my own. Nah, day, fry." She turned then and said the next in common tongue as well, for the Dornish ringing the camp. "Dorne will have justice from my hand." The goatherd's daughter fell to her knees before she could stop her. Not in gratitude, perhaps. More likely because grief and relief had made her legs fail at once. Daenerys hated the sight of kneeling almost as much as she craved the obedience it signified. She stepped forward and touched the woman's shoulder. "Bury him with honor," she said. "His goats will be paid double from my own stores. His daughter will not go hungry." When she rose, Jorah was still watching her with that unreadable gravity of his. "You've made it plain now," he said when the ring began to dissolve and the body was being lifted away. "Yes. Some will fear you. Good. Some will hate you. Better than being despised." That won from him a brief, harsh laugh. "You are learning fast." As the night deepened, Daenerys ordered every rider called to the central fires. They came sullen and curious, men with shorn scalps, long braids, scarred cheeks, bells, leather vests, bronze discs, sweat-dark hair. Horses crowded close behind them, heads tossing in the torch glow. The smell of dust and blood and roasting meat lay thick over everything. She mounted a cart so all could see her. Drogon leapt from the wheel rim to her shoulder, then to the edge of the cart beside her, his black scales drinking the firelight. Rhaegal and Viserion took the shafts like heraldic beasts come to life. "You are hungry," she said in Dothraki. "I know. You are tired of walls and watching and being told no. I know. You did not cross the poison water to haggle with goatherds. Tamba. Gandal." A ripple of rough laughter answered. She lifted one hand toward the dark, invisible mountains north of them. Beyond those peaks, men in steel and silk tear each other apart for a chair. They have gold enough to shoe 1,000 horses. They have fat fields, richer herds, full cellars, and more pride than sense. They are our enemies, not the people who sell us water. This time the murmur was more eager. "You want plunder," she cried. "Then earn it where it will matter. You want glory? I will give you battles the singers will choke trying to name. You want women? Then win wives with honor or take none at all. I will not build my throne on raped girls and murdered shepherds. I will build it on the bones of the men who think this world was made for them alone." "Nay," the riders shouted then, not unanimous, not obedient in the tame sense, but stirred. She saw resentment still, and fear, and hunger. She also saw something she could use. They had crossed the sea for plunder. Perhaps they might now ride for something harder to name. If not, they would ride for her because the alternative had just been beheaded in the dust. When the fires burned low and the camp settled, Drogon pounced upon the severed braid of the man cut down days earlier and dragged it into the flames. The bells hissed once before going dark. The War Council was held the next morning in a chamber open on one side to a garden of hot white flowers and still water. Heat built early, even before noon, and the flies had to be driven from the fruit and ink with sprigs of mint. A map of the southern kingdoms had been weighted flat upon a broad cedar table with knives, cups, and one sleeping dragon who had mistaken the Reach for a warm patch of sunlight. Doran had summoned not half his court, as some princes might have done for theater, but only those whose presence implied either trust or necessity. Erio Hota stood at the door, a maester with a chain like a net across his chest. Khaleesi, she was told. handled the raven's parchments and read aloud when needed. 2 lean Dornish lords she did not know watched in silence from the prince's right, one with the weathered face of a man more accustomed to passes and stones than palaces. Jorah stood opposite them, arms braced on the table. Aggo lurked near the shutters, disliking walls and councils equally but refusing to leave her unwatched among strangers. Doran placed a finger on the map where Sunspear lay. "Here," he said, as if none of them could mistake it. Then his hand moved up across Dorne's long body to the gap in the mountains. "And here, the Boneway, fastest road into the Stormlands, narrow in parts. Good ground for ambush if your enemy knows you're coming. Poor ground for a khalasar if your horses panic or your rear is trapped." Aggo snorted softly at the very thought of voluntarily riding between walls of stone. He spoke in Dothraki to her, and she translated for the others. "He says he would sooner trust a snake not to bite." "A prudent horseman," Doran said. "The prince's pass?" Jorah asked, pointing westward. "That road opens toward the marches and the Reach," Doran answered. "Useful if you mean to find Renly's friends after Renly is dead or defeated. Less useful if you mean to strike before the Baratheons finish choking one another." Khaleesi cleared his throat over a parchment. "Latest reports from Storm's End, my prince. Renly's full strength remains near the castle. Lord Stannis is expected from Dragonstone by sea within days. Lord Tywin still holds at Harrenhal. Robb Stark was last reported west of the Trident, though the Northern King moves quickly and reports age poorly. The Ironborn are raiding the north in Balon Greyjoy's name." "No. 5 kings," Doran murmured. "And all of them make widows." Daenerys looked at the map while the maester spoke. The names meant more now that she stood upon the same continent that bore them. Storm's End, King's Landing, Harrenhal, the Reach. Places once recited by viceroys until they had become litany instead of geography. Now they were distances, roads, supply lines, loyalties, bottlenecks, fields. Jorah set a carved horse token on the map just north of Dorne. "If we move fast through the Boneway before either Baratheon knows she's landed, we can strike whichever emerges bloodied from Storm's End. Their men will be exhausted, their banners confused, panic travels faster than order." "And what then?" one of the Dornish lords asked. "You cannot take Storm's End with horses and promises." "I have not proposed taking castles," Jorah said. "I've proposed taking men. Storm lords who remember the dragons, sellswords, camp followers, stragglers, fear." Doran steepled his fingers. "Fear is plentiful, grain less so." Daenerys moved the sleeping Rhaegal gently aside and leaned over the map herself. Her braids slid across her shoulder like pale rope. "King's Landing?" All eyes turned to her. Jorah answered first. "Too soon, too far. The road is long, the city walls are strong, and if Stannis sails there while we ride there, you risk being trapped between him and the Boy King." "Unless Stannis takes the city first," said one of the Dornishmen. "Then she comes as a rival to a crowned victor with a fleet at his back," Jorah returned. Doran nodded slightly. "The city is a prize for later, or for another fool to blunt himself upon first." No. Daenerys hated hearing her own thought named foolish before she had fully formed it. Yet she could not deny the sense. Her dragons would not breach walls. Her riders could shatter men in the open, raid, scout, terrify, seize roads, perhaps scatter lesser hosts. But they were not siege engines. Not yet. "Then not King's Landing," she said. Doran moved a sun-marked token to the map's eastern side. "The Stormlands are in motion. Renly has raised much of the south. Stannis has ships, and the greater claim if his accusations about the Boy King's birth are believed. Many lords there will bend whichever way keeps their lands whole. If you appear at the right moment, not against a united host, but at the instant unity breaks, you may make some of those lords think again." "Nay, Danya, bide Mru." "And if they do not?" Daenerys asked. "Then you burn their crops," said Aggo flatly in Dothraki. The Dornish lords looked grim. Doran simply glanced at her. "Not unless I must," she said. Jorah lifted a shoulder. "Burning fields feeds no army, nor does chivalry," one of the Dornishmen muttered. "Enough," Doran said, and though his voice never rose, the table quieted. "This is not a song-singer's argument between honor and necessity. It is arithmetic. She has fewer than 3,000 riders, no siege train, 3 young dragons, and the advantage of surprise. She needs ground that favors speed, confusion among her enemies, and a victory that can be carried in rumor farther than in wet. You let that settle. Therefore, the Bone Way. Not with my banners openly unfurled. Not yet. Guides from Euronwood. Water skins laid in advance. Pack mules instead of slow wagons where possible. No foraging from friendly lands. Swift movement north and east to position yourselves between Sunspear and the roads feeding Storm's End. Watch. Wait 1 day, 2 at most, for the Baratheons to wound each other. Then strike whichever remnant offers the richest harvest of allegiance. Nay, and do. Nay. It was patience sharpened into a spear point. Daenerys could feel how close it came to what she wanted without giving her the glorious plunge into war that her blood still yearned for. Perhaps that was why it felt right. "What of open support?" she asked. Doran met her gaze. "When you win, support becomes easier to explain." A bitter answer. A true one. Khaleesi reached for another parchment. "There is more. Ravens from King's Landing. Lord Tyrion rules in the Boy King's name. The court is restless. Lord Varys fills the city with whispers. Flea Bottom with rumors. There is talk of dragons in the east." Jorah gave a humorless grunt. "Let them whisper. Better whispers than chains." Daenerys set her fingertips on the map just below Storm's End. "If Renly wins against Stannis, he is still usurper. If Stannis wins against Renly, he will not welcome me as queen." "No," Doran said. "He will welcome you as wife, hostage, or rival to be removed, depending on how the wind blows that morning." She almost smiled. "Then neither brother is my friend." "Friends are rare in war," Doran said. "Useful men are more common." They spoke until the fruit sweated on its platters, and the candles guttered from heat rather than cold. Distances were counted by horse pace and water source. Possible landfalls along the coast were discussed and dismissed. Scouts were named. Letters, half promises at most, were drafted to houses whose hatred for the Lions might outweigh their terror of the Dothraki. Doran would not sign them yet, but the wax was readied all the same. At last Daenerys reached out and placed the dragon-shaped token that had represented her at the mouth of the Bone Way. "We ride there," she said. No one contradicted her. Sleep would not come easily after strategy. The chamber given her in Sunspear looked eastward over the sea. At night, the water became a black plain broken only by shards of moonlight and the moving stars of distant fishing boats. The room itself was rich without being smothering. Woven rugs, carved cedar chest, narrow bed curtained in gauze against insects, a bronze basin still faintly warm from the bath she had taken. Lemons sat in a bowl beside the window, their skins glowing pale in lamplight. Anyone else might have found peace there. Daenerys found only her own thoughts returned to her with nowhere to run. She stood at the terrace instead, looking over the dark water with a cup of watered wine in her hand. Below, from beyond the walls, drifted the distant music of her camp. Horse bells, laughter, some argument or challenge answered by louder laughter. The sounds steadied her. They were not home. They were hers. Jorah joined her after a time, the hinges whispering behind him. He had shed mail for a linen tunic and dark breeches, but even undressed he moved like a man who expected knives. "You should sleep," he said. "I'm told queens are permitted that. Only foolish ones." She leaned on the warm stone and looked at him sidelong. Moonlight silvered the weathered planes of his face and turned the scar at his jaw pale. "Do you think me foolish?" Often. He came to stand beside her. Less often than before. She laughed once under her breath. The sound surprised them both. For a while they watched the sea in silence. The dragons ranged the terrace and room behind them in restless loops. Rhaegal had discovered a fascination with moths and kept throwing himself at the lamp glass. Viserion crouched on the balustrade like a gargoyle made of pale coin. Drogon was nowhere to be seen, which meant he was either plotting mischief or already in it. "When I was a girl," she said at last, "I used to think home was a thing we had only just missed. One city farther, one ship farther, one ship farther, one richer patron, one kinder host, one more chance." Viserys would speak of Dragonstone, of King's Landing, of the house with the red door, and every place became a door if he wanted it enough. Jorah rested both forearms on the parapet. And now? She looked toward the black mountains inland, invisible from here yet present in her mind like waiting teeth. "Now I think home is what you make men fear to take from you." He was quiet. "That is one sort of home. You do not agree." "I think there are gentler sorts." His mouth tightened. "I've simply never been wise enough to keep them." There was something in the words, some old wound he had not named. She knew more of Jorah than she had once, but not all. Not why exile sat on him like a punishment he had accepted and still resented. Not why loyalty from him always seemed to carry the weight of a debt unpaid. "Do you miss Bear Island?" she asked. He stared west, toward a land too far and too different to be reached from this sea. "Every day. And some days not at all. It depends on whether I remember the pines or the shame." Daenerys studied him. "If I take the 7 kingdoms, what will you ask of me?" He turned his head then, and for one dangerous moment the answer in his eyes was larger than any lordship. He looked away before words could betray him. "A place to die where my father's gods can find me," he said. She had no reply to that. The night seemed suddenly colder. Drogon hissed. Not his usual imperious complaint. This was sharp, immediate, ugly with alarm. Daenerys began to turn. Jorah moved faster than thought. He hit her around the waist and drove her down behind the parapet, just as something slammed into the stone where her throat had been. The sound was not loud. Stone chipped. Viserion shrieked. Then came the twang of a crossbow string from the archway and the pounding of boots. Jorah was already up with sword in hand, shouting for guards. Ario's bellow answered from somewhere inside the chamber like the roar of a great beast. Daenerys crouched behind the parapet, heart hammering so hard it made the world pulse. Another quarrel skipped sparks from the terrace floor. Rhaegal launched himself at the shadow under the arch with all the fury of a creature 3 times his size. There was a yell, a curse, a wild swing of an arm. Drogon came out of the dark above like a cast piece of night and struck at the attacker's face. By the time Ario and 2 guards burst through the doorway, Jorah had the man against the wall with a knee in his chest and a sword edge at his eye. Blood ran from 3 fresh burns across the man's cheek where Drogon had spat more smoke than flame. The would-be killer was no courtier, nor was he Dornish. He wore a plain dockside jerkin, rough boots, and the bland, desperate face of a man who knew the worth of coin far better than the worth of loyalty. A pentoshi by the sound of his curses. The crossbow lay on the tiles beside him. Ario took one look and said, "Alive." Jorah's lip curled, but he eased the pressure enough for the man to breathe without dying. Daenerys rose. Her knees felt weak with the violence of the near miss, and she hated that weakness. The quarrel still jutted from the stone where her head had been. Had Drogon not warned her, it would have been in her throat. "Who sent you?" she asked. The man glared sullenly and said nothing. Ario did not waste threats. He bent, picked up the fallen crossbow quarrel, and pressed its iron tip into one of the burns on the man's face. The scream came quick. "Who?" Daenerys asked again. "Gold," the man gasped. "I was promised gold." "By whom?" He shook his head frantically, whether in fear or ignorance she could not tell. "A factor, in the harbor," said a silver-haired girl with beasts. "Said there's more for the heads if they can be brought whole. More from the west than the east, I swear it." Jorah's expression hardened. Not one master then. Every frightened fool with a purse. Take him, Areo said to the guards. When they had gone, taking the man and the weapon with them, the terrace felt stripped raw. The night smelled of salt, hot metal, and dragon smoke. Jorah picked up the quarrel from the stone and weighed it. Poor craftsmanship. It nearly killed me. It failed. Daenerys looked at Drogon, who had settled on the parapet with his wings half spread, still glaring into the dark as though daring more killers to appear. She touched his neck. His scales were hot as newly worked iron. Not because of skill, she said. Because of him. Jorah's face softened almost imperceptibly. Then, perhaps your children are learning their duty as quickly as you are. A little later, Doran came himself, borne in his wheeled chair by 2 servants, because the lateness of the hour had done nothing to diminish the importance of the attack. He listened without interruption while Areo reported. He studied the quarrel, the scorch marks, the angle of the shot. When Jorah repeated the assassin's mention of Western gold, Doran's eyes hooded. Word travels quickly when money carries it, the prince said. Too quickly for comfort. You cannot remain hidden now, if you ever were. Nay, ma. Then I will move, Daenerys said. He inclined his head. Before dawn, if possible. I will send riders ahead. As he turned to leave, she stopped him. Was it lions? Doran considered. Perhaps merchants who fear dragons. Perhaps men paid by men who fear other men getting to you first. Fear breeds many employers. He looked at the charred stone. What matters is that the game has begun in earnest. Assassins are merely the pieces least worth talking to. After he had gone, Daenerys stood on the terrace until the lamps burned low. The sea moved in black silence beyond the walls. Somewhere in the city, a watch bell rang the hour. She touched the groove the quarrel had bitten from the stone and thought how narrow a thing life could be between one breath and the next. When she finally went inside, she did not sleep. She sat with Drogon in her lap and waited for dawn. Dawn came red. It stained the eastern sky over Sunspear like watered blood and laid copper light along the city walls, while the camp beyond them shook itself awake in a clamor of bridles, shouted orders, stamping hooves and coughing cook fires. Men moved with the sharpened haste of departure. Water skins were loaded, spare bowstrings checked, saddle girths hauled tight. Dornish guides from Yarnwood and farther north waited in a separate knot with their own compact little horses and faces too weathered for ceremony. Daenerys rode out in a plain black cloak over her riding leathers. No crown on her brow, no banner above her head save the dragons wheeling in the brightening sky. That lack was deliberate. Doran had counseled secrecy as long as secrecy would hold. Open declaration could wait until victory or necessity made prudence obsolete. Within the gate court, the prince waited to see her off. He looked grayer in the morning light, more tired, the cost of the night plain around his eyes. Yet he had dressed carefully, in deep orange and cream. A sun worked in tiny gold thread at the collar. Areo stood behind him, vast and motionless. Between them lay the strange tenderness of men who trusted each other long enough that words had become optional. No crowd gathered for farewell. Doran had seen to that. A few household servants, 2 maesters, 1 stable boy trying not to gape at the dragons. The departure was meant to look like no more than an inconvenient guest moving on. Doran held out a small leather case. Letters, he said. Sealed for hands that may prove of use if they believe fortune truly rides with you. Give them only when needed. Daenerys took the case. The wax within would carry the sun and spear of Dorne if broken. It was not open alliance. It was the shadow of one. In war, shadows were often enough to start men trembling. And the guides? Yours until the boneway. After that, if you keep faith, perhaps longer. His dark gaze rested on her with calm intensity. Remember what I asked of you. Keep Dorne from fearing me more than it hates the lions. A flicker of approval. Yes. She hesitated, then asked the question that had lived at the edge of her thoughts since the Water Gardens. If I win, will you raise your banners? Doran did not pretend not to understand the size of what she asked. If you win wisely, he said, I may not need to raise them. The realm will do it for me. It was infuriatingly Doran. It was, she was beginning to understand also how one survived long enough to matter. Jorah rode up then, helm under one arm, the other hand on his reins. The column is ready. Behind him, Ago had the riders arranged in rough order, as much order as Dothraki ever admitted. They looked hard and eager in the morning light. Shame and delay burned out of them now by the nearness of action. Bells chimed in braids. Araks hung curved and hungry at belts. Horses tossed their heads and bit at one another's bridles. The Dornish escorts watched them with measured distrust and the professional acceptance of men who know they are about to gamble with dangerous company. Daenerys swung into the saddle. The movement felt right, cleaner than any courtly motion ever had. From horseback, the world arranged itself into lines and distances that made sense. Then we ride, she said. She might have left then with nothing more, but the riders were looking at her, and so were the Dornish. A queen could not simply turn her horse and hope men filled the silence with loyalty. She drew up before the assembled front of the column and spoke first in common tongue so the guides would hear, then in Dothraki so the riders would feel it in their bones. We go north not as raiders chasing easy fear, but as conquerors. Dorne has fed us. Dorne has watered our horses. No hand raised under my peace will be forgotten, and no hand that breaks it will keep its fingers long. Beyond the mountains, kings gnaw at each other over a throne built by my blood. Let them. We will come upon them while they bleed. Milna, I Ganda. Then in Dothraki, stronger, harsher, made for the saddle and the wind. The poison water is behind us. The rich lands are before us. Ride hard. Take what war gives. Spare what I command. Fail me and die. Follow me and the songs will learn your names. A roar answered her, rough and fierce enough to send a scatter of birds wheeling from the walls. Khaleesi, some shouted. Others cried, blood of the dragon. The Dornish said nothing, but she saw them exchange glances that were no longer purely doubtful. She touched her heels to her mare. At that exact moment, a shout rose from the gate. All heads turned. A rider came pounding through the outer court on a lathered horse, mud and foam dried thick on his leggings, the animal's flanks dark with spent effort. The man wore the colors of Euronwood beneath road dust. He nearly fell from the saddle before catching himself and stumbling to one knee before Doran's chair. My prince, he gasped, from the Boneway, from Storm's Endite. Menna. The courtyard held itself still. Speak, Doran said. Renly Baratheon is dead. The words went through the dawn like a blade. Even the horses seemed to hear it. One stamped and tossed its head. Somewhere overhead, Viserion gave a thin, rasping cry. The messenger swallowed hard. Dead in his camp before sunrise. Some say by sorcery, some say by treachery. His great lords are in confusion. Many have fled. Stannis lays claim to the castle. The Tyro men pull back in disorder. No one knows where their banners will settle by day's end. For one heartbeat, no one moved. Then Daenerys felt the shape of the world shift. The careful balance Doran had described, the poised opposition of two brothers contesting one another beneath Storm's End, had been broken open by something darker and swifter than battle. The Stormlands would be chaos now. Lords uncertain, men frightened, loyalties fluid as spilled wine. The very moment they had planned to exploit had come like a cracked thunderclap, sooner and stranger than any of them had foreseen. Jorah's face hardened with instant calculation. Ario's expression did not change at all. Doran closed his eyes for the briefest instant, whether in pain or thought she could not tell. When he opened them again, the caution in them remained, but now it burned around the edges. Daenerys looked north toward mountains she could not yet see beyond the city and felt her blood answer. When did this happen, she asked. Yesterday, if the rider's tale is true. the messenger said. "The camp still breaks apart." Then there was no more waiting to be done. No more proving through patience. The realm had opened a wound. She would ride for the bleeding. She turned her mare in a tight circle, black cloak snapping at the flank, and raised one hand. The khalasar hushed by instinct before command. "North," she said. Jorah did not need more. He shouted the order. Ago echoed it in Dothraki. The front ranks wheeled. Bells answered the cry of the horses. The Dornish guides spurred forward reluctantly into the lead they had been dreading. Above them, the dragons circled once in the reddening sky, and then flew toward the mountains as if they already knew the road. As the gate yawned open and the first of her riders thundered through, Doran's voice carried to her one last time. "Win wisely." She looked back over her shoulder only once. The prince sat framed by the gold-pink stone of Sunspear, small beside his great guard, hands tight on the carved arms of his chair, watching the war he had not yet declared ride out in another woman's name. Daenerys faced forward again and let the mare have her head. The hoofbeats rolled beneath the walls like distant thunder. Past the wells and orchards, past the startled herdsmen and the last low houses of the city, the columns stretched into the morning. Dothraki riders lean and hard as spearheads. Dornish scouts with their faces set against misgiving. Pack animals heavy with water and grain. A queen at the front with 3 dragons overhead, and a dead king's opportunity blazing before. Behind them lay the sea that had not drowned them. Before them lay the Boneway, the Stormlands, broken banners, frightened lords, and the first true test of whether Daenerys had crossed the world to inherit a war or to master one. She lowered herself over the mare's neck as the pace quickened, felt the animal gather, and smiled without softness. The first war song of her name went ringing into the Red Mountains.